Hi, everybody. It's 1 p.m. on a very warm Sunday afternoon here in Florida, the southern extension of the Lenny Melnick Fantasy Baseball Network. With me, Doug Boyle, here in the Dugouts. We're the only show clinically proven to be 73% effective. It's been 10 days since our last no-hitter. In 12 days, Team USA Baseball will play its first game in the Olympics versus Team Israel. The Cubs' record is 46-46. They're 8 games back of the surely to fade Milwaukee Brewers in third place. Pete Alonso won a second consecutive home run derby. Apparently, shooting up baseball stadiums is a thing. MLB has the pitcher substance abuse problem under control because they got its primary culprit and chief benefactor, Hector Santiago. And you are in the dugout with me, Doug, of the Dugout. And I think I'm going to be switching to 1 o'clock, basically because in order to make sure that I'm adequately prepped, I tend to wake up too early on Sunday, and it kind of throws me off all day long, whereas I naturally do wake up at 7 in the morning, and I can be ready just at noon. And with that extra hour, I can feel a little bit better about it. So 1 o'clock works still before baseball starts. I'm not really talking about this week in baseball. I'm not talking about today in baseball. I'm talking about the week that passed and the week ahead. We'll go through certain things that way. A couple of stories before we get into the waiver wire thing, which is the focus of this podcast. Is I am in the middle of a slow draft with the network, and I'll come back at the very end if there's time. Today might be a little bit less than most because we cover things based on what's happened in the week, and this was a short week of baseball. The one good piece of news we heard this week is that the rumor is that ML is likely to drop all the COVID rules, the 7-inning doubleheaders, and the runner at second base. Though I actually think that the runner at second base has some value. I just think they should probably put it in place like in the 12th inning, give them a couple of normal innings before that. But the truth is, I don't want to watch any 16-inning games. I love baseball. It's different in the playoffs. Let them go nonstop in the playoffs. But during a regular season, when the Tigers are playing the Twins and they go 15 innings, it doesn't do a lot to promote, the excitement of baseball. But, that's another story. They are likely to add the DH in the National League. The same thing says. Good afternoon, chat room, especially Daniel. I hope everything's going well for you. I know you just went through a change of life and you moved to Connecticut, which is something. So good luck to you. I wish you the best. I gave you my phone number if you ever need to talk. I'm here for you. And there's some other people there. It looks like there's about 4. And so with that, 3 minutes in, we'll get started. The injury report this week, shorter one than most weeks. We start with people who returned, just so you know that they've returned. Arizona activated Zach Gallen this week. Oakland activated Mark Canha. Tampa Bay activated Drew Pomerantz. Kansas City activated Wade Davis to get into that ugly mix of a bullpen close situation. Atlanta activated Tuki Toussaint, who's scheduled to start this week coming up. I'm not recommending him, but Tuki Toussaint is another one of those 80-grade names in there. And as long as he has anything of importance to say, he will always be mentioned on my show, along with Akil Baddoo and Chadwick Tromp. There are a couple others, but I actually do like Tuki Toussaint. I saw him play with the single-A Fire Frogs, and he looked like the best pitcher on the team. Never been able to translate it to the pros, though. So I have it. And the New York Mets activated J.D. Davis. That's very important. Houston activated Carlos Correa. Oakland brought back Mitch Moreland, batted him fourth. He actually looks healthy for a change. Milwaukee activated Colton Wong. San Francisco activated Mike Tauchman. Pittsburgh activated Phillip Evans. The Yankees activated Zach Britton, and Seattle activated UC Kikuchi. So those are the guys that are back. Start with the positive thing, then we'll talk about all the injuries. And like I said, there's less injuries than most because there's only 4 days to get injured this week. As far as what went on last night, Jake Fraley of the Mariners has missed the last 2 games. It's due to an illness. Cincinnati's Nick Castellanos was hit on the wrist by a pitch. He was out last night. I'm wondering if that's actually a mute. Someone could tell me if you heard me cough. Brandon Crawford has a hamstring issue, and he missed last night's game. Probably will miss another. He is likely to avoid the IL according to their management. And Xander Bogaerts was held out last night with a sore wrist. Um, those are the guys that were out last night. Did not quite make it to the IL yet, though a good number of people get to the IL. New York Mets, Francisco Lindor went to the IL with a right oblique strain. That's probably going to be more than the minimum stay. Nico Goodrum, after I recommended to somebody in a personal note to pick him up because he came off the injured reserve, is back on the injured reserve with a left calf strain. Sorry about that. Detroit placed Jose Arena on the IL with a right groin strain. San Diego pitchers placed Ryan Weathers on the IL, but then he's expected to pitch this upcoming Friday, so I don't think it's any big deal. Devin Williams of Milwaukee is on the IL with right elbow discomfort. Atlanta has lost Ian Anderson for a while due to right shoulder inflammation. Miami has lost Jesus Sanchez. When I see the notes on the thing and it says nothing, it's usually COVID or they didn't tell you. So there's a couple of those. Alec Boehm, Nick Piton of Philadelphia. Both I don't know the reason for. New York Yankees put Luke Voigt on the IL with left knee inflammation. Colorado placed Jonathan Daza on the IL. And then they actually sent him down. And then San Diego pitchers put Yu Darvish on the IL early in the week with left hip inflammation, but he is expected to pitch on the 19th, which is tomorrow. We also have the situation in the Yankees with Aaron Judge returning from the All-Star break, which was I have a hard time watching large crowds in games because we know the COVID's out there. We know that people are still getting sick. People are still dying. And if you know me and you follow me, I actually had a good friend who was hospitalized just last week. And luckily he got out of it. And he was one of the guys that didn't get a vaccine or whatever. But whenever I see 40,000 people together, I know the stats say that there's really no place in America where there's more than 70% vaccinated. The average is around 45. So if you have 40,000 people in a stadium, odds are good there's 10,000 people that are likely to spread the disease. So it's really no shock that Aaron Judge, Kyle Higgins, Gio Urshela, all those guys lost the COVID. They did bring up to cover those spots Greg Allen, Ron Brantley, hard hitting Chris Gittens, and Hoy Jun Park. The only one that's interesting of the group is if he stays up there. Hoy Jun Park is hitting about 300, and I think he has like 9 home runs and 9 stolen bases in the minors. So you look at guys that have that kind of potential. I mean, it's far away from being important right now, but whenever a guy has a chance to play, if he gets really, really hot, he has a chance to change people's decisions on that particular guy. So those are the injuries for the week. We have some people that are shortly coming back, the guys that are on rehab assignment. Corey Seager is on rehab with the ACL Dodgers. That is the low A ball, so figure them to probably take 10 games in the minors, so they'll probably move to AAA before they call him up. Tampa Bay sent Chris Archer to the Durham Bulls. The Dodgers also sent Edwin Huceta, the ACL Dodgers, on rehab. I don't think he's that important of a player, but he's one of those guys that they can use to keep from having to start David Price. San Francisco Giants, Aaron Sanchez went to Sacramento to rehab. If you remember, before he left, he was pitching quite good. He might have some value in deeper leagues. Jake Lamb is rehabbing in Charlotte for the White Sox. Austin Gomber is rehabbing in Albuquerque for the Rockies. Jose Trevino is rehabbing in Frisco for Texas, which, well, I mean, there's some Texas catchers that I kind of like that Trevino gets to play over, so that's why that's there. Brian Anderson is rehabbing for the Marlins in Jacksonville. Chris Sale, who's been waiting all year long, is rehabbing in the Florida Complex League, which also means it's going to be a longer rehab than normal. And for the Red Sox, John Means was rehabbing in Norfolk. Had a little bit of a troubled first outing, but I still believe there are things there. There are some people that assume that he's a spin rate guy. I'm not 100% certain. Minnesota has Mitch Garver on a rehab stint across the river in St. Paul, and Cleveland has Jordan Luplow with the ACL Indians rehabbing there. We had 2 trades this week. The Braves made a bunch of moves, which were really kind of unimportant. The first one is they traded Steven Vogt to the Braves for Mason Byrne, who was a first baseman. Kind of unexciting, but you got to realize that the Braves really have been desperate for catchers. They've been going through a bunch of different guys. They went on their way to get Kevin Smith. Steven Vogt might have some potential value in deep league, especially 2-catcher, because of the playing time situation. He's going to be the primary catcher, it looks like, in Atlanta until Terrence Hernandez comes back, and that's still probably about a month away. The Cubs traded Jock Peterson to the Braves for Bryce Ball. I like Bryce Ball. Bryce Ball hit like 17 home runs in 30 games in 2019. Right after he got drafted, he was a guy that really shot up his stock right out of the thing. Admittedly, he didn't play in 2020 like so many minor leaguers didn't, and he's only hitting about 205 this year. But you got to take it with a grain of salt because without playing last year, there's a number of minor leaguers that haven't been playing as well. Doesn't mean they won't be. They're just kind of getting up to speed. So I still believe that's a pretty good trade. It does signal a thing that Jack Peterson not only was the signal that the Cubs were not serious about contending this year, he's now become the signal that Atlanta is not considering contending this year. And if things fade like they probably are going in Atlanta, they'll probably trade him to the Yankees, and it'll be the signal of a third team not really serious about contending this year. He is the bad luck charm for all bad luck charms. I would rather see them just throw Pash out there, throw Waters out there. I like Orlando Garcia out there. You lost Orlando Acuna. Nobody's expecting you to be as good as there. And Jock Peterson's not the answer. Jock Peterson is the answer to absolutely no question, except for, I don't know, like, who is somebody that I wouldn't want to invite to a barbecue. And so that's it, the Peterson, the Braves. And that's what passes for good moves, so that's it. The Braves are fairly done. This is going to be a shorter than most thing because, one, it was last week, less happened, but there are basically three categories of reasons why you would recommend somebody on the waiver wire. One is they're a good player that is undervalued, either because people don't know who he is or because he's underperforming. The second is he's a decent bet to be good, and he's shown something recently, and there really is no, because everyone had the day off and only had 3 days, the 3 days off and they only had 3 days to go. It's hard to say what recency is, so that's out the window. And the other one would be some kind of decent jump in playing time position, whereas that did occur in some places. It's very minimal, and it's hard to judge it based on the fact that we've only seen 3 games since the All-Star break, and that means that whatever we see might just be a momentary thing as opposed to a real trend. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into a great deal of why I recommend some of these guys, but I will go into some. We're going to start with pitching, and we're going to end with relief pitching with the guys in between being the other players, because I want to focus on starting pitching. And if you listened to me last week, you'll get a little bit more detail on that than I have done in the past, because this does reflect what I need to know for my leagues, and my hitting has been pretty good all across the board. My pitching, not so much, so I need to spend a little more time looking at that, and especially in one concept, which we'll get to in a minute. But the news when it comes to pitching: the Braves activated Touki Toussaint, San Francisco recalled Logan Webb, Boston recalled Tanner Houck, Arizona activated Mad Bum, and the Mets called up Jared Eichhoff. Nobody in there is a superstar. Touki Toussaint has the 80-grade name. I think the one I like the most is Logan Webb, though. The way the Red Sox are playing, Houck could get saves. Not to get saves, get wins. And when I get to making these recommending realizations on the Yahoo side, on the shallow side, it's going to be more of a holistic approach where I say, well, I'm looking at players that are under 50% owned, and I'm saying I can't believe this guy isn't rostered in more leagues, and he deserves to be rostered in more leagues versus some kind of temporary thing. So for that reason, the list is actually going to be shorter this week than in most weeks. Because in other weeks, if a guy just had a week that was 5 for 10 with 3 home runs, we have to address that even if we don't believe it. On the deeper hand side, we're going to go into that concept we talked about last week, where it seems that there are so many bad teams, hitting teams in baseball, that rather than roster a pitcher of marginal talent like a Domingo Germán or a Cal Quantrill, Griffin Canning, Trevor Williams. There are a number of these guys who will give you some good ones and some bad ones. The best thing to do is to stream at the bottom of your roster. I know that we're talking about weekly fab leagues, but if you have $1,000 in fab, you can afford to throw a dollar or two for your pitcher 8, pitcher 9. Be pitcher 7, pitcher 8, or pitcher 6, pitcher 7. Your last 2 slots, and I think there's going to be reasonable success. I named 3 guys last week, which I'll get to in a second, The week before, I had one guy in mind, which was Jose Suarez of the Angels, who had a very nice outing on Sunday. But that was before it wasn't part of the week coming up. So this week, last week, the three guys that I named, none of these guys are very good except for Brad Keller, and we're going to change the rules of this game after this week. Brad Keller, he got 9 strikeouts in 7.2 innings with 1 earned run. I'm not going to allow myself to pick somebody like Keller in the past. For most of what we're doing waiver-wise, I draw the line at 50%, whereas I'll sometimes talk about somebody who's at 51 or 55. With this, because we're talking about guys that you can pick up for the minimum bid, I'm going to cap that at about 30%, which is the same kind of flexibility. If there's somebody at 32, I might do it. But the truth is, last week, Keller probably wasn't a guy you could get for a minimum bid. You wouldn't have to do a hefty bid, but it probably cost you, in a 1,000 league, it probably cost you $7, something like that. So but the other two guys, Chad Kuhl, Vince Velasquez, not really good names. Both of them pitched 5 innings. Both of them allowed no runs. Chad Kuhl got the win versus the Mets. Velasquez didn't get the win, but he struck out 4. So if you had played those two guys at the end of your roster, you'd have 10 innings pitched with no earned runs, 7 strikeouts, and a win. I'm not saying it's wonderful, but we're talking about the last spot on your pitching roster. It's something worth looking at. So with that, we'll go through the thing. Now, as I was looking through the Yahoo guys, these are guys on the short end that I just really should be rostered more. Hwang Kim is rostered at 48%. Last year, he got stronger as the season went along, and he looked really, really good toward the end of the season. He's been pitching good of late, and the end of the season is coming. They're going to have to pitch him more, so they're not going to dink around with his innings. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's not going to be those weird 3 and 4 inning starts that's hampered with the beginning of the season. He's only 40% rostered. That should be there. I think Tarek Skubal has shown that he's the class of at least the healthy Detroit pitching staff. And he's got the strikeout potential. I actually am liking what I see out of Zach Thompson, the big lanky kid pitching in Miami. He's 39% rostered. And then, of course, David Price is going to eventually be the second best pitcher in Los Angeles Dodgers. As soon as the Dodgers do everything in their power to make sure that they don't win this year, the Dodgers will come in third in that division based on bad management. They should do better than that. The Mets sucks. Yeah, that's the whole point of the episode, is that there are so many teams that we got lost in the fact that COVID came out, and then there was a sticky substance thing, and then of course there's this bizarre rash of domestic violence and rape charges, that we forgot that one of the problems with baseball going into 2020 was the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots are awful, and you can do better pitching Chad Kuhl versus a have-not than pitching a average pitcher like a Domingo Germán versus a pretty good team. So on those deep side, the two guys that I'm going to recommend, I'm still going to recommend Brad Keller. He's had a 1.88 ERA over his last 2 starts. It looks like he's fixing the stuff. He looked good last year. He was a guy that I was willing to draft last year. And what I've seen from Willie Peralta of Detroit has been pretty interesting. Hey, Lenny, it's good to see you out there. Good to see you, Matt Hooper. Those are the two guys there. But then I get to the thing. So these are the teams that we're going to focus on. I'll probably repeat this every week until we'll get it down. I got 4 tiers, the best tier down to the last tier. All of them are worth putting your pitcher up against, but there's different levels. In the worst tier, the best tier for matchups, Arizona, especially when they're away, Seattle, especially at home, Texas, Miami, and Pittsburgh. Those are the 5 teams. And even though I have those notes about that, it's like Arizona being away, like they are, there's some pretty mediocre pitchers on the Cubs that are going to have the opportunity to play Arizona at home at the end of the week. Alec Mills and who's that other guy? Taylor Anderson. Those guys are worthwhile, and we'll talk about those. The second tier is Detroit versus lefties or at home. Kansas City versus lefties or away. They're a better team at home because they're built for that spot. Cleveland, New York. Cleveland, the New York Mets, especially when they're at home. And it especially means that the other thing is still good, just that these are better. So you'll see me recommend sometime home games versus Kansas City and away games for Detroit. Colorado away, Baltimore away. If they're away and versus righties, that's the weird one. But most of the times they face righties, so it comes up a lot. In the third tier, you have Atlanta versus lefties or away. The Los Angeles Angels away. Milwaukee versus lefties. And St. Louis versus anybody, but especially left-handers. And then in the bottom tier, these are ones that I have the hardest time recommending. But they are in that list of people with high strikeouts and low on base and low WOBA. Tampa Bay at home, Cincinnati versus lefties, and Chicago in away games. So, as I said, last week went pretty good. So these are the guys that fit in that category. I weeded out a few of them because there's a lot more players in it, and there's players that you don't know much about. Like, for instance, in that category, Carlos Hernandez, pitcher for Kansas City, is playing Detroit. I'm mentioning him. He's not one of the recommendations, but he's pitched in the bullpen and showed high K potential. And one of the things that we are mining from these cheap pitchers is Ks. And so Detroit has propensity to strike out. That's a guy you should definitely watch. I believe he's pitching today versus somebody, which if I saw him pitch, I might change my opinion. Matt Hooper wants to remind me the Mets suck. That's fine. Jordan Lyles, he's playing Detroit. He's a lefty. He's also one of the guys I'm not recommending, but they do poorly versus lefties. Trevor Williams, which I mentioned from the Cubs already, he's actually got a 2-start week. Both matchups are good. He's got the fantastic matchup versus Arizona later in the week, but he's starting the week versus St. Louis, which is a better thing than you want. But in this situation, these guys are so bad that I'm a little bit nervous about it. And his teammate, Alec Mills, who's playing both guys, will be – I'm going to do 3 recommendations a week. Alec Mills will be my 4th recommendation. Eric Lauer of Milwaukee has been pitching very well. He hits 1 game versus Kansas City. It'll probably be a good game for him. Max Kranick of the perfect game through 5 innings mode for Pittsburgh has 1 game, and it's at Arizona. And then we get to the guys that are what I consider the cream. The cream of these guys are the guys with the best matchups that have somewhat decent stuff. And even though their ERAs probably stink, they have a history of actually performing well versus the bad teams that they played in the past. They just get beat up by good teams. So coming in at number 3, well, we talked about Alec Mills. He's got 2 games. I think that game versus Arizona can be so good, but the game versus St. Louis might not be. When you're talking about scrubby pitchers, you don't want to expose yourself too much. But I think that between the 2 of them, games that you'll get a pretty good outing from them. And if you combine the fact that it's a 2-start week, you might actually wind up getting 10 strikeouts between the 2 games, and that's worth something. And they're number 3B. Number 3A is Eric Fetty because he's got 1 game versus Miami at Miami, and he's shown that he can pitch pretty good, especially versus bad teams. I know that his teammate Paolo Espino has the same matchup, and I'm just choosing Fetty over Espino based on pedigree and the fact that we've all seen, even though Fetty's not been a good pitcher, we've all seen him have pretty good outings, and this is the kind of game they should, based on the fact that Miami doesn't really hit well, and that's a terrible stadium for hitting. In at number 2 is Arizona. He probably won't win, but Arizona's Tyler Widener has 1 game versus Pittsburgh. That's a good matchup. Widener actually has been throwing reasonably well. If he had thrown as well as he's been throwing on a halfway decent team, he'd be somebody we'd be talking about rostering, but he's on possibly the worst team in baseball, Arizona, but he's got the 1 game versus Pittsburgh. That's good. And then number 1 guy that she got for this week is Willie Peralta of Detroit. I already put him on the other side. He's got 1 game at Kansas City. That should be very good for him. I don't really know how he's gotten this good. If you remember, he went into a mode with Kansas City where he was their closer for about 1.5 years, or at least he pitched on his bullpen for 1.5 years as closer for a portion of it. And sometimes those pitchers that go from starting to closing, we always think about the fact that as closers or as relievers, they tend to be better about things if they find a little more velocity and stuff. But oftentimes, when they get moved back into the rotation, they keep that velocity. And I think about pitchers like David Phelps or who is that guy that pitched for the Cubs and the A's, Trevor Cahill. They were better pitchers after time in the bullpen because they learned how to do certain things and they stopped thinking about winning the game by themselves. So that's the four guys we'll check on next week: Peralta, Fetty, Mills, and Widener. Though there's a lot of bad matchups there, so that's the thing going. That's the starting pitchers. Then, which brings us to the outfield. The outfield. We're at 25 minutes. The news in the outfield: Detroit recalled Victor Reyes. Seattle recalled Jared Kelenic. Got to keep an eye on those guys because even though my guess is he won't be that good, these rookies that are highly touted, they tend to follow one of three paths. They're good right away, which is pretty rare. This guy's not going to be one of them. They take a little while to figure it out, and they're good. The Lucas Giolito or the Tyler O'Neill path, or they never get good. But you still get it there. Like one day he's going to be bad, and then if he's ever going to be good, he's going to be good on a turn of a night, on the turn of a dial. Boston has called up Duran, who's probably the biggest call up in a while. I know that Wander Franco got called up, but in almost every league he was already pre-owned. Vidal Brujan came up last week, but I think Duran's more important than Duran. And I don't know if anyone's coming up because Bobby Witt is also very, very owned, but Bobby Witt would be the only guy remaining that I would rather dump money on than Vidal than who I'm talking about right now. A Mets fan and his kid just yelled "Pirates suck" at me as I walked by them. Stay classy, guys. Maybe you're wearing the shirt. It's about being a fanatic. We always say we're fans of the game, but fan is short for fanatic, and fanatic actually means that there's a little something wrong with us. And I'm perfectly willing to admit that. I mean, I have my fetish about baseball is beyond the norm. That's why I'm talking on this podcast to people, and why I'm playing in a number of leagues. And it actually bothers me. Like, I feel bad when my team isn't doing well, which my team isn't this week. I always have a bad All-Star week. I just hate it because the short week throws things off. And if you remind me, I'll tell a story at the very end about how awful our All-Star week was this year for me in baseball. Detroit DFA Nomar Mazara, which I think that's good news. They actually called up Derek Hill, but it means that they're really starting to get to the point where they're going to be serious about seeing their future, which means that Badu's going to be playing, Cameron probably playing, Hill probably get playing. Colorado recalled Sam Hilliard because they sent down Jonathan Daza. Finally, Daza was having a pretty nice year just with batting average, but doing very little besides that. But I'm waiting for them to figure out that their best hitter is Chris Owings. Now, if they play the outfield, they'll figure it out in a week or so when they watch Hilliard struggle for the fourth or fifth time that he struggled. It is the same sort of thing, though. They do owe it to their young guys and to their team as a whole to see what they got in these young guys first. And I think Hilliard will give him 7 days. Los Angeles Angels signed Adam Eaton, and he's actually starting in right field, batting seventh. The one game he was there. It's actually hurting Taylor Ward, which is kind of odd. They seem to be really comfortable with Phil Gosselin playing left field and batting fifth. Like, he hasn't come out of the lineup. And so that realization about Gosselin, it makes him a valid player in a number of leagues. And he actually came up with the Braves. So he played through these minor league teams that I used to watch when they were here. And I always thought that he was a better hitter than he got a chance to be. I think he could be very easily be in that vein of like a Scooter Gennett type, very easily. Seattle optioned Taylor Trammell. Oakland brought back Mark Hanna from the IL. He's went right to hitting first, which was no big surprise. But in the 3 games that he's been back, the guy who's batted second has not been Ramon Laureano, but it's been Elvis Andrus. So that's a thing about Andrus' value. They see something positive about him batting early. I don't know what that is. Atlanta acquired Jock Peterson and batted him first versus a lefty in his first game, which is a sign of complete desperation on the part of the Braves. That's why they're probably going to move up my list of teams to face, because the only hitter you're really scared of on the team is Freddie Freeman now. That's it. Cleveland, it's too early to call in the outfield between Oscar Mercado and Tyler O'Neill. Statistically, Mercado looks better, but it's really based on just one game where he had 3 hits. All the other games has been nothing there. I said before that I'm rooting for Dennis Johnson, but the truth is Sorry, not Dennis Johnson. Daniel Johnson. I'm rooting for Daniel Johnson, but it's mostly because I have him in a minor league. I have him in a dynasty league, and I don't pick people in dynasty league for no reason. I think there's something there as far as multi-talented five-tool possibilities. The Cubs trading Jack Peterson puts Ian Happ back in the mix, who's sort of played himself out, so he will get his seventh or eighth chance to prove that he's worth playing in Philadelphia. If you're looking for steals, looks like Travis Jankowski is their center fielder all the time. And if you're looking for steals, you might have made a move on Tim LaCastro, but he hasn't torn ACL and he's done with the Yankees. So Jankowski is a viable replacement for LaCastro, it really is. So at that point, so we look at the guys in the outfield that I think should be rostered, and there are guys that I've talked about at length several times, except for Akil Baddoo is 34% rostered, and he's got plus speed. He's got great on base percentage. He's going to play in that spot. The DFAing of Nolan Mazzara means that he's going to play. Okay, he's not going to play versus lefties, which hinders his value a little bit in points leagues. But in everything else, he's the guy. Andrew Vaughn has come around. Last month he's hitting over 300. He has a little bit of power. They never thought he had that kind of power, but he's been sort of jettisoned over the course of the year. He's 30% roster. That should be higher than that. And then Brandon Nimmo returned. He bats leadoff for the Mets. It's not the best lineup in the world, but you bat leadoff, and he's got a history of hitting about 300. Those are three guys that should be picked up. The two other guys are Alex Kirilloff at 31%. I can't point to something that he's doing right this minute to it, but he is a top prospect with a lot of power, and he's just going through a slump right now. He's better than this. Then we got to talk about Jarren Duran, who he's a guy that will play every day because he's their best center fielder by a long way over Kiki Hernandez and Danny Santana. He's got enough on-base skills to not kill you. He's got really plus speed to help you out stolen base-wise. And he's really bulked up this year, and he's done work with a batting coach that has helped out guys like Justin Turner, where his home run production has really gone up in the minor leagues and in spring training. So he's a guy. He's 51% rostered in Yahoo, so he's above the threshold. But considering we lost Ronald Acuna, and there's no replacing Ronald Acuna, Jarren Duran has a chance to replace a good portion of Ronald Acuna, and there aren't guys out there that could do that. I could say he could be 70% of Ronald Acuna. He's a guy that could very easily steal 15, 17 bases and hit 10 to 15 home runs. On the deeper side, Jarren Duran is actually one of those guys. He's got the NFBC. Jarren Duran is 42% rostered in that. He's going to be the big call this week. I'll probably put a good deal of money on it. I actually called the guy that has the most money on the phone to see what he was doing, and we played phone tag, and he basically said he was distracted, and I was like, okay, I hope he's distracted enough to not bid on Jarren Duran. Is that good sportsmanship? I mean, you really shouldn't call somebody and say, hey, one of the best prospect for your favorite team is coming up. Did you notice? Anyway, you have a couple of guys here that are – we talked about a couple guys at the very bottom. Travis Jankowski is a stolen base guy, 0% rostered. Phil Gonsolin is playing all the time in L.A. He's 2% rostered. We saw the return of Phillip Evans. He's 17% rostered, though they do have a couple other players return, and I'm wondering about playing time between Polanco, Evans, and Nagowski. Adam Eaton will play for L.A. For the LA Angels, and I think he's better than just being cut by the White Sox. That is a head-scratching concept for me because it's not like they have good players to back that up. I mean, Luis Garcia, I don't know. Ben Gamel in Pittsburgh is another name in there. He's 20% rostered, and then the guy I actually really like is Darren Ruff in the short-term fill-in. He improved a lot of what he's done batting-wise going over to the Korean leagues, came back, and his numbers are really good. I'll talk about him more in a second at first base, but he's outfield eligible. in basically every league he plays in, because that's what he started with this year. So that's my recommendations. Badu, Vaughn are recommendations. Duran's a recommendation. There are a couple of guys you can look at. At first base and third base, the news this week. Mitch Moreland came back from his injury, and he batted fourth. And I saw him play, and he looked more like the Mitch Moreland of old. It's a one-day look thing, so I'm not going to butt too much into it. But whatever he's shown, it's the first time he's batted. They batted him fourth in months, so there might be something going on there. Colton Wong has returned with Milwaukee, which has moved Jace Peterson over to first the last couple of days since he's been back, and Keston Hira to the bench. There's a guy that we're hoping might show something here, but the short-term outcome is he's not going to play. And LA Dodgers look like Pujols is starting every time versus lefties. At least he has over the last 4 times they faced a lefty. So that's good to know as far as that goes. On the third base side, Washington's Starlin Castro has been on the restricted list due to domestic violence, a story that's a little too common now in baseball. The Mets brought J.D. Davis back and returned batting fourth. I did pick him up in one league there I could beforehand. He's available. He's a must-add. Washington looks like Jordy Mercer is going to get the playing time that Starlin Castro has. I'm not a big fan of that. My preference would be something else where Josh Harrison moves back to the infield and we see Yadiel Hernandez in the outfield, but that's not the short-term thing. And then a guy that's not very good, but he has good on-base skills, and it's important to know because it's changed a number of things over in Texas, is Brock Holt has batted first the past 5 games for the Texas Rangers, which is more in a deep league. A guy who bats first is playing might have some value, but it's more of a knock on Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who has dropped in the batting order, and you got to worry about him a little bit at shortstop. If you're playing a shortstop, I do have Kiner-Falefa in one Yahoo league, and he's, of course, my catcher. He's a perfectly fine catcher. We are at nothing else there. We are at 37 minutes. The guys I look at, and I go, what the heck is going on? Why aren't these guys drafted? Why are these guys? It's CJ Cron is 36%. He's half the season. He's a must-start player, one of the best in the thing. And the other half of the season, he's okay. Play might be a little bit bad, but you put the thing together, you're looking at 30 home runs and a decent little batting average. Ty France, I've talked about a number of times. Wilmer Flores, it's a weird thing going on there in San Francisco, but it seems like everybody that plays well. He's one of those guys. Darren Ruff's in that category, and that's what I talk about. Look, the one that I really like is if you were to combine Brandon Belt and Darren Ruff, you'd have a pretty good player. There are a number of people that are going to picking up Bobby Bradley, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. He's a home run play. He's had 10 home runs in 111 at bats. Okay, Darren Ruff has had 120 at bats, 9 more at bats, and he's had 1 less home run with 9 home runs. And if you combine Ruff with Belt, and they do kind of complement each other, you're looking at 19 home runs and you're producing batting average, and for nothing else, a wasted spot in there if you had the space. Joey Votto is 30% rostered, and Bobby Bradley, I said, and Alex Kirilloff, as I said before. So in that, I'm saying I'm recommending CJ Cron, Ty France, and then Darren Ruff if you're looking to replace Brandon Belt. I mean, you know, for other guys, but he's got a short shelf life. But there are some decent players at first here available. In the deeper leagues and at BC, you got John Nagowski, who's been hitting. He's since coming over to the Pirates, and I know it's only like 6 games. He's hitting 486 with a 568 slug. Admittedly, he doesn't have any home runs, but you still got to watch that. Pittsburgh is becoming that team that is so bad that they're giving people playing time that you might be able to find some decent stuff in there. And if you noticed, I've recommended Gamble at some level, Nagowski at some level, Philip Evans at some level. It's a team to look at that way. Philip Evans is also 70% rostered. He's also on my first base list. He'll also be on my third base list. Darren Ruff is 12% owned in a deep league. He's playing and he's playing well. He's worth going. And then I said Mitch Moreland at 2%, who it's a bit of a gamble. He was a very good player who this year just hasn't put it together. His bad numbers have been okay, But the big problem is that he hasn't played. But you can get him for $1. On the third base side, you have Luis Urias, who on the season, it's Milwaukee's in first place. And the reason they're in first place is because good young pitching, but it's because they've gotten enough hitting out of players that you wouldn't expect. They've been basically carried by Avisail Garcia, Luis Urias, and the acquisition of William Adames. And Luis Urias has 13 home runs and 5 stolen bases. So that, you're looking at a guy that's probably going to hit 20 some home runs and steal 13, 14 bases. You can't overlook that. We talked about Ty France, Wilmer Flores, Nico Horner. On the deeper side, the short term the guy that filled in for Lindor with the Mets was Luis Guillorme. But I think that Villar was losing time with the return of J.D. Davis, but Villar might wind up being their shortstop, and he's probably their best hitting possibility, and he's definitely their best stealing possibility in a roto league where you kind of have other solutions for batting average. Dylan Moore is a player that adds stolen bases and he's only rostered 40%. The last name on there is I fully do expect Chris Bryant to get traded, which makes the power output of Patrick Wisdom probably worthwhile, which is something that I finally come to realize this week as both a Cubs fan and a fantasy baseball guy. So on that side, Urias, Nico Horner, Ty France. There are other guys though. On the third base side, it's been a real rough spot there. But this week, I think there's actually somebody that's worth picking up in the deep leagues. 22% rostered, and I give him my and that's the White Sox Jake Berger, former number 11 pick, former really hype prospect, former injured guy in the minors who didn't get a chance to play. He's only batted 25 times since he's been up, but he has an OPS over 1,000 with a home run, and he could, be the guy. He can also play first base. The thing, I know there's a little bit of a filling in for somebody issue there, but I think Berger is a third baseman that really should be more talked about. I'm amazed that people talk about Gavin Sheets more than him. It just boggles my mind. The other two guys are Phil Gosselin and Philip Evans. We talked about Brock Holt. If you're desperate, he's batting first. And then Harold Castro is the guy that you can always go to if you're just looking for an average play who just won't harm you. Better than nothing kind of thing. Which brings us to so that's it. So my recommendations are on third base are Urias, Horner, France, and Jake Berger is a heavy thing there. Shortstop, second base, and we're at the 43-minute mark. At shortstop, the return of Jeff McNeil and Jay Davis has moved Villar to the bench 3 minutes, but Lindor to the IL might bring him back. Washington has been, for some unknown reason, but you got to admit, just like Brock Holt, has been batting Alcides Escobar first. And then, of course, I said tell you about. Well, there's nobody in a 15-team league at third base. There literally is nobody. The best player in the question it asks is, how does it have to be to pick up Brock Holt? If you lost a player to injury in a 15-team league where there's 30-man rosters, Brock Holt literally is at least he's got playing time. And that's the thing you can say about it. The other guys that we're talking about, I think, the best of the bunch in this league, and I'm not talking my league, I'm talking about across the board, guys rostered in 50 or less leagues. Jake Berger at 22, Phil Gosselin at 2, Philip Evans at 2, Harold Castro at 7, and Brock Holt at 0. Yeah, you'd have to be pretty darn desperate. But if you're in a situation where you're looking for a third baseman, and those are your choices, you are desperate. So I would take Berger first. I would take Gosselin second. But if somebody wanted to take Holt over Evans, I wouldn't argue him out of it. So that is it. You do have to be pretty desperate, but that is the difference. It's like the problem with that's why I've been trying to do all year in Managers. I want to be a show that covers the whole week, at least in brief, so at least you hear what happened. But the other part is to talk about it seems like everybody talks about these deep leagues, and there's an importance to that because the hardcore people that listen to these podcasts are people that play in deep leagues. But the people that need the pockets more, who are a good portion of us, they don't play anything like this. And like if we had a discussion over Brock Holt, it's like that would just be stupid in that league because there's a different level of how good you have to be in this. So I go from one side to the other, and it really is a big difference. If you're playing in a normal league at third base, normal is probably not the right word, but the types of leagues that are that are more common, 10, 12 team leagues, there are some decent players. You have the Flores, the Horner, France, Urias. It's like I know that Andrew, the person who makes thing, loves Wilmer Flores. Wilmer Flores is 71% owned in NFBC, which is not everybody, but most everybody. So would I take Brock Holt over Patrick Wisdom? No. Yeah, you have to be desperate, but that's what it calls for. Somebody out there theoretically is desperate. On the shortstop, the return of Detroit optioned Willie Castro to Toledo. That's big news because he was somebody that people had a lot of expectations this year, and he failed out of it. He failed out. They recalled Isaac Paredes. Last time they called him up, he played third base. They're bringing him back at this time, probably play second. Definitely a player to watch. He's probably I think he's their second best non-pitching prospect. They do have a number of good pitchers on that team in their prospect level. Miami recalled Isan Diaz. Tampa Bay was a big deal. They called up Vidal Brujan. A lot of people dropped a lot of money on Fab last week. For some reason, Vidal Brujan has not played in 4 of 7 games so far this year, which I can't tell you why, but something to watch, and it's disappointing from a fantasy player standpoint, but especially for those who made the move. And I would worry significantly about Enrique Hernandez's playing time with Jaron Duran's call-up. The short-term fix is going to be to throw him at second base, but at some point they'll probably call up Jeter Downs. So Enrique Hernandez's days are numbered, and Danny Stanton's even worse. Though, he will get that, utility type some at bats. But Brock Holt will get more. Not that I'm jumping up Brock Holt, but Brock Holt has serious on base skills. He can take a walk, and that's not the reason why they're batting first. You notice it more when the guy bats over 204. So who's available in the shallow leagues? The guys that we're looking at. Paul DeJong is at 26%. Paul DeJong is a guy that can hit 30 home runs. Probably won't, but he can get close to it. And he can steal 10 or so bases. He was a guy that was probably drafted as 13th best shortstop going into the season. And the fact that he's, as we said, we're looking at guys that we don't really get why they're this unrespected with their ownership level. 26% Yahoo. It seems a bit underdone. Luis Urias, who we talked about. J.P. Crawford, who looks like, as we talked about in the previous thing, looks like he's in a breakout thing, former number 1 prospect in the world, 24%. Josh Rojas, I guess the people are getting tired of a bad, low-scoring Arizona team, but he's available in 60% of leagues. Brendan Rodgers, I know he just went through some kind of injury thing, but he is the future of that team at 14%. Deeper down, you have Elvis Andrus at 7%. Like I said, he is batting second for the Oakland A's. Jose Iglesias at 5%. Orlando Arcia at 2%. Iglesias and Arcia are guys that I'll mention that are actually key things for the deeper leagues. Arcia, since he's been in the outfield for the Atlanta, he's hitting 290 with a stolen base and a home run. But we're only talking about a week anyway. But he did some really nice things in the minors. He was leading all minors in home runs for the first 3 weeks of the season until he was passed by Brujan, I believe, with 16, hitting 320 in the minors. And he was a guy that we were up on last year. And I'll just mention that he has played 7 games in the outfield, so he's going to be outfield eligible probably by Thursday. Jose Iglesias, 48% owned, doing what we expected out of the Jose Iglesias, hitting above 300 with a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, not much. You're talking 9 home runs and 4 stolen bases, but a good batting average in the 300s. Alcides Escobar, 0% owned. How desperate do you have to be to own Alcides Escobar, who's batting leadoff for the Washington Nationals? The difference between Alcides Escobar and Brock Holt is that there are a lot of good shortstops, and there's actually some reasonably decent shortstops available in this league. Now, the class of it is Alcides Escobar. So the class of it is like Jose Iglesias, but there's a lot of guys in the 50s that aren't here. Like Elvis Andrews is in the 50s. You know, that guy probably available in many leagues. That kind of thing. There's nothing available on the third base side. So yeah, I would take Brock Holt over Alcides Escobar, which is a dumb thing to talk about. So I'm going to stop. Bobby Witt is 32% rostered in those leagues. I imagine that if you were available in your league, you should pick him up. Among the guys that are left that are big call-ups, which is part of the reason why I'm so high on Jared Duran, is you got the pitchers, which most of them have come up. I don't really believe in Mackenzie Gore. And then you have Bobby Witt, and that's it. So I think Jared Duran is probably the second best prospect coming up for the rest of the year. Spend your money now. At second base, in the shallow leagues, Colton Wong, back from injury. He's hit 298 with 7 home runs and 6 stolen bases this year. How is he only 30% rostered? I mean, I guess the too many injuries thing. But he's back. Luis Urias, we mentioned, Brandon Rogers, Josh Rojas. Jed Lowry is hot right now. The second base, 26% rostered. Somebody should pick up. And then we have the Wilmer Flores, Dylan Moore, same sort of thing. In the deeper leagues, it gets a little bit uglier. It's hard to even name 3 guys that you would pick up at second base. Rugi Odor, considering the injuries in New York, has been good for average, and he's been hitting about 260 over the last month, which might be an improvement. He does have 9 home runs on the year. Brad Miller gets regular playing time in Philadelphia and does some nice things with it. Chris Owings is the guy that I talk about the most there, but we'll go through that. We still got to wait about another week for Colorado to give up on the other guys. And so that's it. So the guys there are in the shallow leagues. Colton Wong should be rostered. There's a lot of guys that probably should be rostered. In the deep leagues, the only guy that I really am going to focus on is Chris Owings. Jordy Mercer seems to be taking the place for Starlin Castro at second. Well, the time thing, like I said, I hope it changes. I'm not recommending Jordy Mercer. In that San Francisco thing, the time of the Stella is rehabbing right now. So that gets us through those things. Then we'll get to catcher and then the closer report, which take a little time. Sam Huff of Texas was optioned to Frisco. He's a big hitting catcher, and he only came up for a couple of days, but he's somebody you should keep an eye on if you're looking for somebody that can hit a bunch of home runs as a catcher. I actually really do like for the hitting like Jordan Hicks has been doing as a second catcher there. San Francisco picked up Joey Bart for 1 day, sent him back down in place of Kirk Casale. Atlanta made the trade for Stephen Vogt. He's likely the primary catcher. Seattle called up, and this is kind of a call up that sort of went under the radar. They called up Cal Raleigh, who was like their number 6 overall prospect. He's a catcher who had 28 home runs in 2019. He actually stole like 4 or 5 bases, and he was hitting 324 at AAA in about 200 at bats with 9 home runs. And so there's something there. To be honest, he's my number 2. I've been sort of cycling through catchers, so I've been paying more attention than most people. That's why you hear too much about him on this show. But he's my number 2 pickup, except for $1 behind Elias Diaz. But I haven't heard his name mentioned anywhere. Cal Raleigh, remember that name. Other guys in the deep leagues. So in the deep leagues, Kirk Casale. Sorry, Kirk Casale is my number 1 guy. That's who it was. So it's Casale, Raleigh, Diaz. In the shallow leagues, Nick Stassi is at 23%, 27%. He's the only guy in the shallow leagues that it makes any sense to go after. In the deeper leagues, where you're looking for anything out there, you have Kirk Casale is 5% owned. He's been hitting 444 in place of Posey while he's been out. Stephen Vogt with his new emergence. He was once a good hitter for a while. You got to pay attention to the playing time. The playing time has shifted for Danny Jansen, too, in Toronto, and that's a much more potent lineup. So even though you're not going to expect tons and tons of home runs or whatever, being in that lineup might mean more runs and more RBI opportunities than your average catcher. Cal Raleigh, we named Jake Rogers for pure power in Texas. Along with that, Zach Collins, 44%. And the two guys that are rehabbing that are on the rise are Travis Node and Mitch Garver. Defo or Flores? I mean, I think it's Flores. You know, that one's not even really that hard. There are some situations where Flores, I don't count on Flores to play. You know, if the Giants have 6 games in a week, I don't think that he plays all 6 games. But Defo also doesn't play all 6 games for the Pirates, so it's an easy pick. Now, if you were taking Flores versus somebody that played all the time but might be a lesser hitter, it might be a tougher question. So, which brings us, well, let me go over that. Max Stassi is the recommendation. Cal Raleigh, Kirk Casale. Those are the 3 guys that I'm talking about. I mean, Casale and Raleigh in deeper leagues. Which brings us to the relief pitcher closer report. Every week we do a closer report because everyone's always mining for saves. It's hard to tell anything based on 3 games of work with 3 games off. So much like the other stuff, we're taking a holistic approach to it, looking at every team situation and the guys that you should or should not know, should or should have. The guys that are safe, Mark Melanson, though Drew Pomeranz is a good enough pitcher as a middle reliever, and he's going to be the guy that would take over. I'd imagine if something's happened with Melanson. He's a guy that probably should be rostered, but I'm not worried just as of yet. Josh Hader in Milwaukee, safe as you can get. Liam Hendricks, Chicago White Sox. Did you get Ken Krimble of Chicago? Then lights out, safe as you can get. He is a trade possibility. The guy that I think, if you're looking to bank for future saves, would be Ryan Tepera. And I think the odds of them trading Craig Kimbrell are about 95%. We talk about a lot of guys being trade possibilities. If they don't trade Kimbrell, they've just messed up. You know, you can make an argument about Brian or one of the other guys where it's like they couldn't get the right price. They should trade Kimbrell for something, and somebody should grab him. The Dodgers have Kelly Jansen, who's safe. Alex Reyes of St. Louis is safe and an all-star. Brad Hand is safe in Washington. Richard Rodriguez is safe in Pittsburgh. And I know everyone likes David Bednar over there. I'm more of a fan of Kyle Crick, but there are guys should he get traded, there are guys that he can come up. The Mets, Elias Diaz is safe. Boston, Matt Barnes is safe. Though Adam Ottavino is a must-add in holds or solds leagues where you want to get holds, good ratios, and occasional save. He's probably the best in the business. Will Smith is safe in Atlanta. Raciel Iglesias is safe in L.A. Houston's Ryan Presley is safe, and Jordan Romano of Toronto is safe. There are a couple of okay situations, which are Miami and Texas. Miami, Yimir Garcia is pretty much he is the closer, and he's safe, but you're sitting in a situation where their best pitcher on the team is somebody else, and his propensity to let up home run balls doesn't have what I would say is a closer makeup. Now he does play in a stadium that allows deep fly balls to be out, so that helps him out a bit. But Anthony Bender is the guy to back up them. And then in Texas, Ian Kennedy, much like the Ken Gribble thing, if Texas doesn't trade Ian Kennedy, they've just failed. And it's hard to say who's the best guy in there. Spencer Patton looks the best to me, but who knows? It's a bad situation. And when Kennedy wasn't the closer for 3 weeks because of an injury, everybody they put in that spot to close the game blew the save. Everybody. Then you have all these committees. You know, Cleveland looks like Cleveland has a committee between Karanchik and Clase. It does look like of late that Karanchik is becoming the closer. So if you had something better to roster than Emmanuel Clase, I could understand it. Karanchik is somebody that maybe somebody hasn't noticed that yet. You might be able to trade for him like he's still splitting time. In San Francisco, Jake McGee is the primary first among equals over Tyler Rogers. The Rogers will still get a save. I would imagine that split's like a 2/3, 1/3 split. Oakland has been going with Lou Trevino almost all the time. Jake Dickman will get a save once in a while, but he's looking more and more like a closer. It wouldn't shock me if in 2 weeks I have Lou Trevino as safe. It would shock me about Jake McGee, but not about this guy. Kendall Graveman of Seattle has been very good as a closer, though Paul Sewald is a guy that should be rostered. He'll be the lone guy that I'm actually recommending in deeper leagues because everybody who gets saves is rostered. Taylor Rogers of Minnesota, he blew a save this week. He's in there with Hans Robles. Robles is blowing his shake at Sarah saves, but they split it between the two. In Tampa Bay, Diego Castillo is the guy you want, though. I am curious if Nick Anderson comes back from his injury, if he becomes a big part of it. And they have all-star Andrew Kittredge, the most awesome all-star. I tuned in just to see Andrew Kittredge pitch because screw that. Who cares about Soto and Ohtani? All-stars like Andrew Kittredge are the guys that make this thing because he's the most deserving all-star since Steve Swisher. Though he actually has been pitching okay, but he's not all-star caliber. That was just Kevin Cash being throwing a bone to his own teammates. In Cincinnati, they still have a committee, but Heath Hembree does seem to be the first guy among that. And he's the first guy on the Reds this year to actually convert 4 consecutive saves, which is something to be said for that. I do think he's a closer right now, but I'm not going to count out the other guys. And I think that especially Lucas Sims, when he returns, it'll probably be a committee between Hembree and Sims, with Hembree because he's the right-hander getting more of them. So he's definitely a guy. He's a guy that I will recommend picking up. Ranger Suarez blew a save for Philadelphia. There's Jose Alvarado and Archie Bradley are in that mix too. If I had to pick a Philadelphia guy, I'd pick Ranger Suarez, but I'd hope to not be in that spot. In Kansas City, they're splitting time. They're splitting between Scott Barlow and Greg Holland. If you're not really worried about saves and you want a better pitcher with the ratios and stuff, you would pick Scott Barlow. If you're more concerned about saves, which most of us are, you would pick Greg Holland. In Detroit, Jose Cisnero and Gregory Soto. Gregory Soto got the save this week instead of their one save of the week with Soto. And Michael Fulmer's coming back, and I do believe that Fulmer, when he comes back, will take over as that spot, provided he comes back before the trade deadline. They need to show him as being something worthwhile if they think about trading him. In situations that are just plain bad, Baltimore, Colorado, Arizona, Joakim Soria blew his only save chance league. It looked like he had the thing by default, and he actually had 2 good outings. So he's probably still a closer. I just don't want any part of it. Don't want any part of Colorado, Daniel Bard. Don't want any part of... I think Baltimore, if they gave it to one guy, if they gave it to Sulzer or Fry, it would be okay, but... Or even when Valdez was the man earlier in the season. But they moved in a bad situation. They don't win enough. In the games that they play, the scoring is too high for close games, and these guys just aren't pitchers, so stay away from. Those are the 3 I'd stay away from. I would stay away at some level between Kansas City and Detroit. The difference between Kansas City and Detroit is that Soto, Cisnero, Fulmer, Barlow, and at some level Holland are actually decent pitchers, whereas the guys you're choosing from on this side are just not good. So the recommendations on the shallow side is Heath Hembree, Ranger Suarez, 49 to 46% rostered. On the deep side, Paul Sewald at 37. And I did say that Drew Pomeranz came back. He's only in 30-some% of leagues. He probably should be run. So that's the end of my recommendation portion, and exactly where I want to be. Colton Wong. These are my names that are primary. Colton Wong, Kwang Kim, Akil Badu, Andrew Vaughn, Orlando Garcia, Jose Iglesias, Cal Raleigh, Chris Owens, Willie Peralta, Jake Berger, Ty France, Brendan Rodgers, Nico Horner, the Darren Ruff, Brandon Belt combo, Mitch Moreland, Paul Sewald. The league leaders are in batting average are Vlad Jr. is leading the American League with a 335. Nick Castellano is leading the National with 330. The league leader in wins are Kyle Hendricks and Julio Urias in the National League with 12. Chris Bassett has caught Aaron Saval and tied him with 10. Saval, I think. The one thing I put off the end, and we're early enough to get there, it's like we're doing this slow draft, and for a midseason league, and it's weird. I like slow drafts, and I think slow drafts run well are really a pleasure to be a part of. But we've had this, before. If you're listening to the roundtable, we talked at length about the slow draft that I was in a best ball league, which I should talk about that. Like I got screwed there. I forgot about that one too. where one guy decided that they're just going to take up all their time, and strangely enough, people that I'm talking to in this thing said that, well, if it's an 8-hour draft, they should be able to take all 8 hours. And like, that is I still think it's the dumbest thing. No, when you're in a slow draft, you have available to you amount of time, and you should take all that you need, but not much more, because you want to get the thing done, in a real amount of time. If everyone took all their time in this mid draft, we literally would be done right about when the season was over. So you got to do it. So what I say is that you should tell people you're doing a slow draft. You say, look, you have an 8-hour maximum. We want to get done in 8 days, which means that you should draft on average, whatever it is, 2 hours and 33 minutes. So if you're going to take 5 hours on one draft, make sure you get a 15-minute pick in there and a 20-minute pick in there to balance yourself out, and you don't take up more than your share. So this thing is going a little slow. I mean, it did just start Saturday. And I guess considering it's only supposed to start Saturday night, we're further ahead than we should be. I should look at see if anybody's been drafted in there. But they're talking now about something that's much like what I wanted to say is you should put the expectation that a person drafts in a certain amount of time, or else they don't play. But what's going to wind up happening is the actual worst world. So it's like there's reasons why people don't like fast drafts. There's reasons why people don't like slow drafts. What you wind up happening is that at some point they're forced to reduce the time between picks to 1 hour, which means you just have a crappy draft. The draft was just garbagey. It's like a good number of people are gonna be auto picked because parameters weren't set. I talked about it. I have a slow draft league that I've been a part of for better than 10 years, and this year we took over 2 weeks to get our draft done. It took us like 16 days, and it was the first time we were over for 2 weeks in probably 7 years. Because what happens is once it gets a flow, people start to know, if you're the middle pick, like you're the sixth pick, like my picks come up, we get through about two rounds a day, so you have 30 rounds, it's 15 days. And I know that as a middle pick, that my first pick is, I'm usually waiting on the clock, whatever, the guy that I pick second in the morning when someone gets up. So I'm waiting for him to make his pick. He lives in Texas, so I know it's not going to be till 10 o'clock my time. So check my phone at about 10:30, and there I am. I'm on the clock for 12 minutes. And then my next pick comes up at around the time that most people get off work at 4:45, and then everyone starts to feel where their pick is, and it just goes through that. You make two picks a day, maybe on a weekend, or if there's like a baseball game on and everyone's watching, you get through 4 rounds in that thing, but people get used to it. But the idea of somebody that's signed up for a slow draft going to a 30-minute time clock, like we did at the NFPC, that's just thing. That's the way you should present. If you're ever doing a slow draft, you should say to somebody this. You should say, "That's it. We're having a slow draft. They're 8-hour maximum picks. We want the draft to be done by X date. You divide that out. Everybody should be averaging whatever the number is, 233. If we fall below that average on any given day, right, then we're going to reduce the clock by a certain amount. It's like, well, by 1 hour, 7 hours. So now, because 7 hours to 8 hours is not going to be a big change. And then, somebody else does, somebody else does it, you reduce it by 1 hour. And this way, you're not going from 8 hours to an hour where there's no draw out there. And the fact that somebody knows that if they make the mistake, they're hurting everybody, are going to make them want to not make the mistake unless they're psychopaths or total a-holes, like the guy that Deuce Man who played in that one league. The second thing we talk about is in that best ball league, I lost to Kuna. I have 10 injuries. I am actually not in first place right at this moment. It's due to the shortened week. There was that freaking 24-8 game on Friday night, and the team I was playing, I was 100 points ahead of the next person, over 100 points ahead. And on Friday night, the team in second place scored 148 points on one day, and I scored 18 points because my pitchers weren't pitching, and they didn't hit very well. Now, don't get me wrong. I think I'm going to take back over first place, but if that was the problem is there was only 3 days of pitching, and so that's going to lock in as one of the biggest margins of differences that we've seen all year long, based on the fact that it's a 3-day week. If it had been a 7-day week, he probably still would have beat me, but he probably would only gained about 40 points. But he's probably going to wind up gaining about 70 this week, which would put him right behind me in second place. So, and with that, remember that George is on at 6:30 tonight. Can't miss thing. I know that my schedule is kind of worked around where I have been able to listen, but haven't been able to participate, which kind of stinks. And listening is not quite as I'm not quite as focused on that. Lenny and Andrea are on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. They're on for about 2 hours. You get a feel for what they do on the Sirius Network. Lenny's back on 9 in the morning on Monday. Really like the info on closers. You're good. Hey, look at that. Show. Yeah, I have this somebody named William E. who says, I really like your info on closers. You're good. It's always good to hear a compliment. I don't have a lot of listeners. I do have about 25 listeners. The funny thing about the names of the 25 guys listening is that about 19 of them are people that you know. They're by name. So I always think of myself as being like the quietly, I'm like, they say in the comedic industry that he's the comic that comics like. I'm the podcaster that podcasters like. That's where I do this thing. I get little notes from people. But I don't mention who they are. I do this for a thing. I literally moved this season to do something a little different because I'm focused on what makes my team better. And you should listen to these things. And it'll be a quick thing. It covers the entire week, though very superficially in a lot of situations. And I know that there's something going on because this is the point in the league where some people fade away and go toward that other sport, football. And this is a spot that in about an hour and 15 minutes, you can get everything you need to know to survive your other week. I'd much rather you listen to Lenny 5 days a week in the morning. He reads all the newspapers, so you don't have to. But I know what people are looking for, and that's why I do what I do. Thank you very much, William, for the wonderful compliment. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu.